The elite at Davos have always played the self-made act to hide a truth that slaps you right in the face. World power doesn't belong to the best. It was sealed 4,000 years ago on a lump of clay. That dried blood-colored antique lying silently in the Oxford Museum is the Weld-Blundell Prism, a list that modern scholars are still deluding themselves into believing is merely wild mythology. Kingship descended from heaven? Sounds as flowery and hollow as the cryptic eulogies of fanatics, right? But hold on. If it's just a bedtime fairy tale, why did those fanatics have to record the genealogical ledgers of 12 dynasties with a morbid obsession and a miraculous precision akin to modern-day accountants? What really happens behind the velvet curtain of civilization when the genealogies of the 8 European royal families and the 3 banking empires manipulating global cash flows today all trace back to the exact same starting line in Mesopotamia? What if the phrase "kingship descended from heaven" isn't a religious metaphor, but a literal genetic contract forged in flesh and blood? They do not sit in those positions because of talent or the will of the people. They rule because of the anomaly that has been flowing through their veins for thousands of years. Congratulations to the curious souls who have bravely stepped across the boundary of illusion. I am Zorro, and welcome to Dark History, where we don't memorize hypocritical history pages. We strip them bare. Royal families. That is the number currently controlling the vast majority of Europe's network of power and wealth. 3 banking dynasties manipulating almost the entire flow of the world's currency. What do you usually think when you see them sitting nonchalantly at summit meetings in Davos? That they are the winners in the evolutionary game of capitalism? Or that they possess brilliant minds ahead of their time? Forget those sleep-inducing history textbooks. Today we are going to dissect a story consisting of 12 dynasties, a clay prism, and an arrogant declaration so extreme that modern scholars have to plug their ears and slap the myth label on it. Kingship descended from heaven. But what if they weren't speaking metaphorically? What if the bloodlines they have obsessively and morbidly calculated, bred and recorded for thousands of years, are the very same bloodlines smiling at you on the evening news tonight? Right now, at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford, UK, a clay prism lies silently behind protective glass. Its catalog number is AN1923.444. Academia calls it by a dry name, the Weld-Blundell Prism. It stands a mere 8 inches tall, has 4 sides, is molded from baked clay, and bears a color that always gives me the chills, the color of dried blood. In 1922, Herbert Weld-Blundell dragged it up from the dust near the ancient city of Larsa in southern Iraq. For the past century, it has sat there, witnessing perhaps only a few hundred curious onlookers a year, stopping long enough to actually read what its surface is screaming. If you are standing in front of it, what hits you right in the eyes are 400 lines of cuneiform. Sharp, wedge-shaped gashes were ruthlessly pressed into the wet clay before it was baked hard. Every character remains sharp and resolute after 4,000 years. Close your eyes and imagine. The clay was once soft in someone's hands. A reed stylus pressed down. A person living in an era closer to us than the horrifying events he was transcribing decided, this information must be preserved forever. And you know what? It's not some mushy poem, not a hymn praising the gods. It is an audit report, a list of kings, cities, lengths of reigns, successive dynasties, which family held power, and how long they milked that power dry. The Sumerians, the great ancestors of civilization, were essentially accountants with obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. They invented writing not to write poetry, but to track assets. barley rations, the number of sheep in the pen, taxes, land ownership. They recorded everything insanely, and they applied that exact same cold mathematical obsession to recording the origins of their rulers. The Prism opens with a brief Sumerian line, but one powerful enough to smash all our concepts of power. Namlugal Antar. Kingship descended from heaven. Pay attention to the terminology of these ancient accountants. Not kingship was blessed by the gods. Not the king was chosen by the powers above. Kingship here is a material thing, an institution, an entity, a right to rule that physically descended, moving vertically from an invisible point A in the sky, landing straight down on point B on Earth. The verb they use is exactly the same as how they wrote in warehouse receipts. Barley descended from the storehouse to the workers, a physical transfer. And when that invisible object touched down, the list begins. Kingship landed in Eridu. 8 kings ruled before an apocalyptic catastrophe, a great flood, wiped everything out. 8 kings. Not some murky, once-upon-a-time era, but specific individuals, ruling in specific cities, with specific time frames. And this is exactly where modern scholars close the book, sneer, and refuse to believe what they read, because the numbers inscribed on this dried blood-colored prism are impossible for human biology. Listen to this. Alulim ruled Eridu for 28,800 years. Alalgar sat on the throne for 36,000 years. Enmenlu-Ana ruled Bad Tabira for 43,200 years. Dumuzid, yes, the womanizing shepherd from later myths, ruled for 36,000 years. And so on. 8 kings, totaling a neatly recorded 241,200 years of kingship before the flood. The reaction of historians? Oh, it's all symbolic. They were inflating the numbers to awe the public, showing off their legitimacy. Don't take it literally. Sounds reasonable, but it ignores a core truth about the Sumerians. I repeat, they were accountants, not dreamy writers. We have thousands of clay tablets proving they could calculate compound interest. They tracked stellar cycles with a precision that Europe wouldn't catch up to until the Renaissance. The Plimpton 322 tablet at Columbia University laughs in humanity's face by proving the Sumerians were using Pythagorean triples 1,000 years before Pythagoras' grandfather was even born. Would these math-worshipping people, these scribal schools producing hyper-accurate astronomical tables, suddenly exaggerate wildly in the single most important document defending the legitimacy of the ruling elite? Look closer. Those numbers weren't pulled out of thin air. They are perfect multiples of 3,600, the Sumerian SAR unit, the core of the base 60 numeral system you are still using today to count hours and minutes. Alulim's 28,800 years is exactly 8 SAR. Alalgar's 36,000 years is 10 SAR. 43,200 years is 12 SAR. A cold, tightly wound mathematical structure. Furthermore, these absurd numbers don't just appear on one prism. They are copied, exactly verbatim, on many different independent fragments, from Nippur to collections in the British Museum. Across different periods and different scribal traditions, they adamantly maintained that exact structure. Myths change through word of mouth, but these lists do not. They are locked down, fixed like a legal document. So, if they weren't lying, what were they trying to preserve? It's a code, hiding the number of generations or astronomical cycles. It's the lifespan of an institution bearing that king's name, not the biological lifespan of an individual. Or 3. Our understanding of human history before 3000 BC is truly just a torn blank page, and the beings ruling back then were not entirely human. We'll keep all 3 possibilities in our heads, like a loaded bullet. But whoever they were, however long they ruled, their era was ruthlessly slammed shut. The rhythmic list suddenly halts. a chilling line cuts across the clay surface, a mere 3 words in Sumerian, Am-ma-ir-ra-bi. The flood swept over, lights out, everything sank under the water.
Then the flood swept over.
3 words in Sumerian, Am-ma-ir-ra-bi. And this is where the king list shifts from an absurd mathematical curiosity to something that demands you sit up straight. Because this great deluge wasn't a bedtime fairy tale, it is geology. In the 1920s and 30s, archaeologists grabbed their shovels to dig up Sumerian cities like Shuruppak and Kish. They were expecting to find successive cultural layers, but no, they slammed into a wall of mud. Specifically, sterile alluvial sediment layers 8 to 11 feet thick, about 2.5 to 3.3 meters, wedged right between occupation layers. Picture this. Beneath the mud is the pottery, the tools of one world. Above the mud are the remains of another civilization. In between, nothing. No artifacts, no bones, just cold silt deposited by massive stagnant waters. When Leonard Woolley excavated the Royal Cemetery at Ur in 1929, he thought he had hit worthless virgin soil. But then he dug a little deeper, and another occupation layer appeared right beneath that deadly mud layer. His local workers, with just a passing glance, whispered, "That is Noah's flood." Carbon dating nailed this catastrophe down to roughly 2900 BC. No, I'm not talking about a global flood submerging Mount Everest. Geology doesn't support that. But it was a localized mega flood in southern Mesopotamia, so violent and absolute that for those trapped there, the world had literally ended. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers burst their banks, swallowing the entire alluvial plain for months. According to the Epic of Atrahasis, do you know why the gods hit the reset button? Because humanity was too noisy. The racket gave them insomnia, so they decided to clean up the problem. One family survived, one boat was built. Sound familiar? But let's return to our clay prism. After the water receded, after millions of corpses were wedged beneath the mud, the text records something spine-chilling. Kingship descended from heaven again. Kingship was in Kish. I want you to pin that word "again" into your brain. Whatever alien, parallel, or divine force threw kingship down to earth the first time just came back and did it a second time. The system was rebooted. But the rules of the game had changed, and here are 3 anomalies that you, acting as a historical detective, cannot ignore. First, the coordinates shifted. Eridu was dead. The center of power moved north to the city of Kish, a migration of survivors. Second, lifespans were collapsing. The post-flood kings still lived bizarrely long, but the numbers were in free fall. The first king of Kish ruled for 1,200 years. The next was 900 years, then 600, then slowly dropping into normal human lifespan thresholds. Use your logical reasoning here. If this was purely boasting to polish their reputations, why lower the numbers? Why not keep throwing around the 36,000-year figure to look imposing? This systematic decline is screaming a truth at us. They were recording a process of dilution, the dilution of a material substance, a type of divine blood that was gradually depleting as it crossbred with mortals, generation after generation. They claimed these new rulers didn't spring out of nowhere. They were the descendants of the elite families who survived the catastrophe, those carrying the pre-flood encoded bloodlines. Ziusudra, the Sumerian Noah, didn't just survive, he was upgraded to a demigod, becoming the ancestor of the new humanity. Catastrophe greater than selective survival, greater than status upgrade, greater than divine genealogical connection. That is the formula for absolute power. And from those muddy ashes, 12 dynasties rose up. Why 12? 12 major gods on the Mesopotamian version of Mount Olympus. 12 months in the calendar, 12 zodiac signs, and 12 bloodlines bearing the mission to rule on their shoulders. Nothing is random. Let's profile the first suspects on this blacklist. We are compiling dossiers on the ones who invented the concept of the elite. Dynasty number 1, Kish, the obsession with preserving the breed. Kish was the first post-flood capital. 23 kings, starting with names that flake off along with the broken pieces of clay. But let's stop at Etana, he who ascended to heaven. Legend says Etana was infertile. A crisis erupted. The royal bloodline was at risk of extinction. What did Etana do? He rode an eagle straight up to the divine realm solely to beg for a plant of birth for his wife. Strip away the mythological shell and look at the core. A morbid obsession with lineage. He didn't go to heaven to ask for weapons, wealth, or wisdom. He needed an heir carrying the correct blood. Maintaining the gene pool was so critical that it justified the most insane actions. Dynasty number 2, Uruk, the mathematics of mortality. Uruk, the city of the famous Gilgamesh. But forget literature. Look at the math. The king list confirms Gilgamesh was a historical figure, ruling for 126 years. His genealogy is clearly recorded. Father was King Lugalbanda, demigod. Mother was the goddess Ninsun, 100% god. The result? The epic loudly declares, 2/3 god, 1/3 human. Pause for a beat. Are you shivering yet? 2/3 and 1/3. That's not empty flattery. That is the language of genetics. If divinity wasn't a biological substance that could be measured, quantified, and inherited, what the hell does that fraction mean? Gilgamesh went mad over immortality not out of greed, but because that cheap 1/3 human in his DNA was killing him from the inside. He sought out the flood survivor for the secret and received a bucket of cold water. The old world is dead. In the new world, even the genes of the gods must rot. Dynasty number 3, the death game of fanatics. By the first dynasty of around 2600 BC, archaeology dumped a bucket of cold water on the skeptics. Leonard Woolley excavated 16 royal tombs, gleaming gold, silver, lapis lazuli, and dozens of corpses. Inside Queen Puabi's tomb page 779 were 74 attendants. They weren't tied up, they weren't stabbed. They calmly walked down into the grave, drank poison, and lay down to die alongside their master. Do you think people naturally engage in mass suicide out of cultural duty? Get real. If you were truly brainwashed, or truly knew, that the person sitting on the throne carried the blood of the gods and following them to the afterlife was your only ticket to any status, then that cup of poison was a bargain. Mesopotamian society believed the ruling class's blood had physical value on a metaphysical level. Dynasty number 4, Awan. Enemies need DNA too. The Awan were outsiders, sweeping down from the eastern mountains of Mesopotamia, modern-day Iran. They were rivals. They butchered Kish to seize power. But guess what? The scribes still had to put them into the king list. Because the brutal rule of that era was, you might have an invincible army, but if you couldn't prove, or fake, your connection to the primal bloodlines, you were forever a trashy usurper. Power required a genetic passport, and this bloody Game of Thrones had only just begun. 9 more dynasties are waiting to be named, and we will see how this divine DNA managed to survive the massacres. Dynasty number 5, Lagash, the seed of monsters. Lagash isn't on the main capital axis of the king list, but they were the biggest show-offs in Mesopotamian history. Around 2500 BC, this dynasty rose. We have mountains of their inscriptions. Look at the bloody stele of the vultures of King Eannatum, currently displayed safely in the Louvre, far away from the battlefields it once depicted. On that cold stone face, Eannatum doesn't call himself blessed by the powers above. He proclaims himself the seed sown by Ningirsu, the patron god of the city. Do you see the difference? Seed sown. That is explicit biological language. And then Gudea appears. Lagash's most famous ruler left us up to 27 statues of himself carved from glossy black stone. Gudea is the perfect model of the priest-king. Within him, political power and spiritual authority merged into one. That power didn't come from ballots. It came from ancestral sperm. Dynasty number 6, Umma, the war of opposing DNAs. Umma was the thorn in Lagash's side. These two cities slaughtered each other generation after generation, just over a strip of borderland. But you're dead wrong if you think this was just a normal war over resources. It was a theological war, a collision of bloodlines. Umma claimed they carried the patronage of the god Shara. When they signed bloody treaties or planted boundary stones, the language was always, "My family carries a divine mandate through blood. This territory is mine." You couldn't just plant a flag and claim land. You had to prove your DNA had the key code to unlock power over that soil. Dynasty number 7, Adab, the first globalization ambition. This dynasty was brief, with only 2 kings, but the craziest of them, Lugal-an-Mundu, carved a chilling declaration into stone. He ruled from the lower sea to the upper sea, from the Persian Gulf all the way to the Mediterranean. Maybe he was bluffing. But what's the message here? Why would a tiny kingdom demand to swallow the whole world? Because in the Mesopotamian mindset, if you had the correct god blood, you weren't born to be a village chief. You were born to be the master of the earth. A global empire was their genetic mission. Does that sound similar to the multinational corporations and shadow powers trying to erase borders today? You're starting to see the familiarity, aren't you? Dynasty number 8, Mari, the frontier genealogy hoarders. Mari sat way up at the headwaters of the Euphrates, all the way in modern-day Syria, the edge of the world. But the rulers here were fanatical otakus for Sumerian culture. Excavating Mari in the 1930s, we found 25,000 clay tablets, a massive library. What were they hoarding? King lists. They recorded genealogies just as obsessively as the original capitals. Why? Because when larger kingdoms marched in intending to flatten Mari, they stopped. The conquerors didn't burn this archive. They cherished it. Because Mari's genealogical archive was the certificate that helped the conquerors connect themselves to the primal bloodline. Killing people is easy, but buying a legit pedigree is priceless. Dynasty number 9, Akkad, the usurper and the gene upgrade problem, 2334 BC. The world changes forever. Sargon the Great rises, violently smashes Mesopotamia, and creates humanity's first empire. But there was a stain. Sargon was an outsider. He was born to a secretive priestess, set adrift on the river in a basket. Sounds like Moses, doesn't it? This story predates Moses by 1,000 years. Sargon started out as the king's cupbearer, then rebelled. He didn't have god blood. So how did Sargon solve this legitimacy crisis? He wove a tale of divine intervention, and most importantly, he made his daughter, Enheduanna, the first named female author in human history, the high priestess, directly connecting the Akkadian dynasty to the ancient center of power. But Sargon's grandson, Naram-Sin, was the one who pushed this game past the boundary of madness. Naram-Sin didn't bother claiming to carry god blood anymore. He proclaimed, "I am a god." Look at his victory stele in the Louvre. Naram-Sin is as massive as a giant, trampling on the corpses of his enemies, and on his head, he wears the horned crown, the symbolic weapon reserved strictly for true gods. Was Naram-Sin a megalomaniac? Or did he believe that through his family's inbred marriages, the divine genetic components had been successfully recombined, making him a perfectly bred Superman? Dynasty number 10. Gutians, barbarians without a genetic passport. The brilliant Akkadian Empire finally collapsed under the swords of the Gutians, invaders pouring down from the Zagros Mountains. For 91 years, 21 Gutian kings sat on the Mesopotamian throne. Sumerian scribes wrote of them with utter contempt. Those who know no restraint, barbarians. Why? The Gutians tried to copy everything, patronizing temples, marrying the surviving princesses of the old dynasty, trying to graft themselves onto the divine bloodline. But they failed miserably. The lesson here is bloody and clear. You cannot fake DNA. You can chop off the old king's head, but if your veins don't pump the blood that the system recognizes, you are forever an alien virus that the body of power will seek to purge. Dynasty number 11. III, the golden age of biological control. When the Gutians were kicked out of Mesopotamia, Ur-Nammu took the throne, establishing the third dynasty of Ur around 2112 BC. This was the pinnacle of Sumerian civilization. During these 100 brilliant years, the Ur third state became a bureaucratic machine suffering from the worst obsessive-compulsive disorder of the ancient world. We found 120,000 of their administrative tablets. Remember, that's only the 1 to 2% that survived over thousands of years. It's estimated that around 6 million tablets were written. What were they counting? Every grain of wheat, every strand of sheep's wool, and naturally, every drop of royal sperm. They tightly monitored every marriage of the princesses to establish alliances, recording every child born. The throne passed from father to son, from brother to brother, totally locked within one family. No outsiders. King Shulgi, the greatest king of Ur III, wrote hymns praising himself, loudly declaring, "I was born a hero. The revered god Nana begot me." Not chose me, but begot, gave birth to me. The divine bloodline was blatantly affirmed. Dynasty number 12. Isin, the inheritors of the remnants. Every great empire eventually rots. Ur III collapsed due to drought, crop failures, and nomadic invasions. In 2017 BC, the Isin dynasty rose from the ashes. Ishbi-Era, a former governor, picked up the crown. And of course, what was his first order of business? Hauling out the genealogy again, connecting himself to Ur III, declaring himself the legitimate heir to that bloodline. This pattern was absolutely unbreakable. So, we have the complete blacklist. 12 dynasties. 12 families bleeding themselves dry over 1,000 years just to scream a single message to the world. We rule because of what flows in our veins. We are the descendants of entities that fell from the sky. But let's pause for a second, my detectives. It's time we overturn the root of this entire fanaticism. That phrase, "Kingship descended from heaven." What the hell was it actually describing? A superior civilization high in the mountains? Or literal ships stepping out from the stars? And more importantly, when Mesopotamia collapsed at the hands of the Greeks and Romans, did that precious DNA evaporate? Or did it quietly spread to the west, infiltrate medieval nobility, and ultimately, is it floating in the veins of the people manipulating the stock market today? Leave a comment and let me know. Which modern family do you think reeks the most of Mesopotamia? We have profiled 12 dynasties, 12 octopus tentacles gripping tightly onto the Mesopotamian region. But, you detectives of the dark, if we want to truly understand this mess, we have to put the phrase, "Kingship descended from heaven," on the operating table. Because if you want to know what the modern elites sitting smugly in closed-door boardrooms believe in, you have to understand what the hell their ancestors wrote onto clay faces 4,000 years ago. Turn on the surgical lights. Bring out the scalpel. We are going to slice open Sumerian grammar. Namlugal enta ed 3D3a. Namlugal, the prefix nam turns a word into an abstract concept. Lugal literally means big man, the term for a king. So Namlugal is kingship, the substance that makes a king. Anta. An is the sky, the heavens. Ta is a suffix indicating movement away from an object, meaning separating from the sky. Ed 3-D, E 3-A. This is the chilling part. It's a verb indicating physical movement with a destination. To descend, to fall down, to land. Do you see the problem yet? If these ancient scribes meant the king was approved or blessed by the gods, the way medieval European kings used to babble, they already had the vocabulary for that. When they wanted to say someone was chosen, they used PA 3-day, chosen/selected. When loved, they used Chi-ag 2. But no, they used ED 3-DE 3-A. The exact same verb they used when writing inventory reports. Barley descended, transferred from the storage to the workers. They were describing a delivery, a physical transfer of an invisible mass from another dimension, landing straight down on Earth. And even more terrifyingly, when translated into Akkadian, they used the passive form nu zu was brought down. Some force had to have brought it down. And it wasn't just brought down once. Remember the suffix -b-da, again /repeated. After the massive flood, the system was sent down to Earth a second time. Mainstream academia will, of course, wave this off. Oh, that's just poetic metaphor. Stop overanalyzing. How ridiculous. Do you think Sumerian accountants wrote poetry in an administrative report? When Sumerians wrote poetry, it was drenched in similes and flowery imagery. But the king list is as dry as a tax return. It only has data, name, city, number of years ruled. In that cold, thick mathematical context, why on earth would they use poetic metaphor for the foundation of their power? What happens if they were speaking literally? Not literally in the sense of smoke-belching spaceships landing in the town square, but literally in the sense that the right to rule was not birthed by humans. It came from the outside. It was a genetic component, a physical material implanted into certain specific families, called god blood in ancient terms, called a programmed form of DNA in modern terms. If you still think I'm wearing a tinfoil conspiracy hat, look at these 6 pieces of evidence that the metaphor explanation can never answer. Why record genealogies with such morbid obsession? If power was just a spiritual blessing, you only needed to prove the gods liked you. But no, they had to prove who their father, mother, and grandparents on both sides were. That is the mindset of geneticists, not priests. Why the fraction of divinity? Gilgamesh. 2/3 God, 1/3 human. You can't be blessed 2/3. But you absolutely can carry 2/3 of an ancestor's genes if intentionally crossbred. Why did lifespans collapse after the catastrophe, dropping from 28,800 years to 1,200 years, then down to a few decades? That is precisely the model of recessive gene dilution upon continuous crossbreeding with a mortal population. Why were the elites hysterical about incest? Mesopotamian royal families married half-siblings at astonishingly high rates. To keep the money? No. To keep that god blood from being diluted out into the peasant masses. Why were conquerors stuck with an inferiority complex? They had invincible armies, but upon seizing the throne, the first thing they did was grovel to find a princess of the old dynasty to marry. Power by brute force was garbage without genealogical backing. The terrifying consistency. This isn't the remnant of an oral fictional tale. This language of bloodline appears identically on thousands of clay tablets from dozens of independent cities spanning over 1,000 years. It was an industrial-scale power design system. So what ultimately actually descended? We have three options, and the truth lies somewhere within this madness. Option 1, the symbolic hoax. Everything was just one giant psychological manipulation play. The original elite used religion to trick the poor, turning political power into something sacred and inviolable. Option 2, high-tech refugees. The heavens were actually the high mountain peaks. The Great Flood wiped out an advanced civilization living up there. The elite survivors brought math, architecture, and astronomy as they fled down to the plains. To the Mesopotamian farmers of that era, these people in shiny armor calculating star trajectories looked exactly like gods. And so the crossbreeding began. Option 3, non-human intervention. The Anunnaki gods were actually extraterrestrial intelligences, or interdimensional entities. They used biotechnology to breed a hybrid ruling class, plantation overseers carrying god genes to manage the human workforce in their stead. The god blood is actual alien DNA, and it needed to be strictly preserved. Regardless of which scenario you choose to believe, the practical result remains unchanged. Bloodline dictates status. That system was deeply rooted. Those families believed they were different from you and me on a biological level. But do you know the most chilling part of this story? When the Mesopotamian empires crumbled to dust, that system did not die. It just changed its residential address. Look at the map. These 12 bloodlines didn't vaporize. They infiltrated the Hittite dynasty. The Hittites, through carefully calculated marriages, passed that bloodline to Troy. Troy fell. The survivors grabbed their genealogies and boarded ships, drifting to the Italian peninsula to become the founders of the Roman aristocracy. The Roman Empire shattered? No problem. The Germanic nobility and medieval European royalty quickly snatched up those genealogies, claiming themselves as descendants of Rome, of Troy, and by inevitable consequence, of the ancient Near East. Do you think they were just claiming it for prestige? Modern genetic studies have dealt a fatal blow to skeptics. There was a massive influx of admixed DNA from the ancient Near East flowing straight into the European elite population during the Bronze Age. Those ridiculous medieval genealogical papers turn out to be backed by molecular biology. Every major royal family in Europe today, the dynastic corporations holding the globe's financial lifelines, the ones sipping champagne at Davos discussing how you should eat bugs instead of meat. If you use a strong enough magnifying glass and trace back their hidden family trees, you will find them standing right at the gates of Uruk, of Kish, of Babylon. They are not the best. They are simply the ones who believe they carry a mandate from a force that descended from heaven thousands of years ago. And until you realize that, they will continue to master this game. Most of us grew up with the Great Flood story as a moral lesson about salvation. A pious old man, a giant boat, adorable animals marching 2 by 2. So touching, right? But as someone who specializes in peeling back the rotting curtains of history, I am here to dump a bucket of cold water on you. The Great Flood was not a random natural disaster, and it certainly wasn't a peaceful fairy tale. At its dark depths, this is the story of a devastating genetic bottleneck and an intentional genealogical purge. Let's step into the archives of the British Museum and the University of Pennsylvania Museum. On cracked clay tablets like CBS 2673, recording the Eridu Genesis or the Epic of Atrahasis, the reason for humanity's doom is recorded with absurd bluntness. Humans multiplied too much, and we were too loud. The gods, ruling from on high, suffered severe insomnia. The decision was made in a cold, divine council: pump in disease, follow it up with a drought, and finally release a massive flood to wipe out these ants once and for all. But the god Enki, the one supposedly involved in creating us in the first place, secretly broke the rules. He sent a dream to his most favored mortal, Atrahasis, a name meaning exceedingly wise. Enki told Atrahasis to build a boat, gather animals, skilled craftsmen, and his family on board. The waters rose. The screams sank beneath layers of muddy waves. Everyone else died. History was wiped out under meters of mud. When the water receded, Atrahasis roasted meat as an offering. Do you know what the most ridiculous part is? The gods, the very ones who ordered the mass slaughter, suddenly realized they were starving to death because there were no slaves left to sacrifice food to them. Burying their faces to inhale the scent of the sacrifice, they hurriedly blessed Atrahasis. Immortality, divine status, and a mission: repopulate the world. But let's stop here. Use the mindset of a detective. Why Atrahasis' family? Modern archaeology confirms that around 2900 BC, colossal mud floods swept through cities like Kish and Shurupak. For the people living there, it was doomsday. But this story isn't just recording a geological phenomenon. It is hiding a genealogical dossier. This great purge was not random at all. The only family to survive didn't do so by hitting the lucky jackpot. They were intentionally selected by the Creator God. Why? Because they carried the best genetic heritage. They were the individuals with the most concentrated God blood remaining. In modern genetics, if a population is 99% wiped out, all the diversity of subsequent generations stems from that surviving 1%. That is a genetic bottleneck. Before the catastrophe, a mixed world with varying degrees of God-human admixture. After the catastrophe, only a single highly concentrated bloodline remained. The system was rebooted, but this patch update was installed via a single USB drive that had been carefully handpicked by the gods. And this is where the truth gets thorny. All the rulers post-Great Flood, from the dynasty of Kish to Uruk, with the famous King Gilgamesh trekking to find the survivor Utnapishtim, down to the dynasties of Ur and Mari, use this story as their political resume. They proclaim themselves descendants of the single bloodline that survived the catastrophe. They leaned on two undeniable sources of authority: pre-flood bloodline, their ancestors interbred with the gods from before the world was submerged. The second descent of power, kingship fell from the sky a second time after the mud dried. This pattern could not be broken. It was a malicious code deeply embedded into the operating system of human power. When the Hittites conquered Anatolia, they copied this exact genealogy. When Cyrus the Great of Persia entered Babylon in 539 BC, he didn't claim to be a foreigner, but the restorer of the rightful order of the Mesopotamian gods. Even Alexander the Great of Greece in 331 BC took the trouble to visit the Temple of Marduk in Babylon, acknowledging himself as an instrument of the divine and claiming shared origins with the ancient Eastern bloodlines. Even the later Roman aristocracy laid false claim to being descendants of Troy, a branch of Hittite culture which had already intermarried with Mesopotamian royalty thousands of years prior. Do you see the connection? Not a single great conqueror in the ancient world dared to rule based on pure muscle power. They ruled based on genetic code, based on the certification that they were direct descendants of the entities who survived the divine purge. Are you still here? Good. Because now, we are going to ransack the human resources department of the ancient heavens. If you think the creation of humanity was some poetic scene like, oh man, form from the dust, accompanied by a warm breath of love, you're about to be disillusioned. What the Mesopotamian texts record is not religious poetry. They read exactly like a blood-stained biological experiment report. Let's turn back time. Before humanity existed, the world was divided into two distinct classes. The supreme Anunnaki gods enjoyed luxury, and the lesser Igigi gods had to do manual labor. Imagine the poor Igigi having to carry hoes, dig canals, and build cities under the scorching heat of the Near East for 2,500 years. Obviously, one day they were going to snap. And they really did snap. The first strike in the history of the universe broke out. The Igigi burned their tools, besieged the mansion of Enlil, the supreme god, and roared, "We are on strike! This amount of forced labor is unbearable." The supreme gods panicked and convened a board of directors meeting. They couldn't roll up their sleeves and work themselves. They were gods. That was when Enki, a figure resembling a mad surgeon bearing the title of Wisdom, stepped up to the podium. His solution? Manufacture a replacement worker, a new biological machine specifically designed to shoulder the toil for the divine. But where to get the raw materials? Tablet B M78941 of the Epic of Atrahasis at the British Museum records this process in cold blood. A god had to be slaughtered. The unfortunate victim brought to the operating table was Geshtu-E. Why him? Because his name meant ear or intelligence. He possessed what the Akkadians called temu, intelligence and personality. Geshtu-E's throat was slit. His blood poured out and was fully collected. The fertility goddess Nintu acted as the chief technician, taking that blood and mixing it with clay dug up from the Abzu, the subterranean freshwater ocean layer. Using a wooden brick mold, yes, you heard that right, a house-building brick mold, Nintu molded 14 prototypes, 7 male, 7 female. This mixture of clay soaked in divine blood was then implanted into the divine wombs of surrogate goddesses. After 10 lunar months, the first batch of biological slaves was born. Humanity officially cried its first cry. The goddess Nintu stood looking at her product, dusted off her hands, and bluntly declared, "I have removed your heavy labor. I have imposed your toil on man." Bam! Freedom for the gods, chains for us. Babylon's Enuma Elish also confirms a similar recipe. The creator god Marduk beheaded Kingu, the leader of the rebel faction, drew his blood and kneaded it into primitive man. In short, the core nature of you, of me, of all of us, according to the Mesopotamians, is a hybrid entity. Half cheap earthly material, clay, the other half supreme genetic material, god blood. But hold on, let's use a little mathematical reasoning. If a liter of the god Geshtu-E's blood was divided up to mix the first 14 people, then the divine concentration was horribly diluted right from the F1 generation. Each person probably carried only 5 to 10% god blood and 90 to 95% clay. The problem starts here. If you are a worker, 5% divinity is enough for you to obey and hold a hoe. But what if you want to be king? You need a higher concentration. The Epic of Gilgamesh clearly and proudly states that the great king Gilgamesh was 2/3 god, 1/3 human. That mathematical figure only makes sense if divinity is something quantifiable, measurable, and most importantly, inheritable. The Anunnaki gods didn't stop after the first experiment. They continuously descended to Earth, seeking human lovers and producing new hybrid descendants. Enki philandered everywhere. Inanna had mortal lovers. It was from here that an exclusive, subdivided caste system based on genetic code was born. Normal humans contained 5 to 10% god genes from the first batch of 14 people. Royal families contained 30 to 70% god genes thanks to continuous crossbreeding with the Anunnaki later on. Demigod heroes contained 50 to 75% god genes, like the arrogant Gilgamesh. Pure-blood Anunnaki, simts percenti divine. Do you understand now why ancient royal families were morbidly obsessed with inbreeding? Why siblings had to marry each other? Why they had to marry within the clan? Not because they had bizarre sexual preferences. They were desperately doing one thing, protecting their genetic concentration. Marrying a commoner was equivalent to pouring water into a glass of fine wine. It would dilute 30% of their precious divinity. Endogamy, viewed from this angle, was a ruthless and incredibly pragmatic measure of controlled breeding. They called it blood and temu. We, in the 21st century, call it DNA and genetics. The Mesopotamians didn't have microscopes, but they accurately described how genetic information operates. Traits encoded in blood, passed from parents to children, diluted by outbreeding, and retained through selective mating. By now, the historical detective in you is certainly asking questions. What is the truth behind this? Just a societal scam? The elite fabricated the "we have God genes" story to force the peasantry into unpaid labor? Memories of a highly advanced civilization? The gods were actually humans from a prehistoric high-tech civilization. The clay was the more backward, primitive tribes. They interbred and passed down genes for intelligence, longevity, and leadership. Or, the most chilling original truth? That there truly was a genetic engineering intervention by non-human entities, and the families ruling the earth are the result of this crossbreeding technology? Regardless of which lens you choose, there is a flesh and blood historical truth. The Mesopotamians believed this absolutely. They viewed biological genetics as the determinant of power, not hollow social contracts. And they built a massive political machine to operate this belief system, a machine we call the priest king. In the modern world, we pride ourselves on the concept of the separation of church and state. Religious power takes the religious path, political power takes the political path. But if you took that mindset back to ancient Mesopotamia, they would laugh in your face before taking you away to be sacrificed. Here, religion and politics were not two sides of a coin. They were the exact same solution flowing in the exact same vein. Power gushed from a single source, the bloodline. Let's take a stroll to Nippur, what could be considered the Vatican of the Mesopotamian world. Nippur wasn't a violent political center. Kingship could shift back and forth between cities through war, but the sacred center was immutable. Nippur was the headquarters of the god Enlil, the supreme deity who held the celestial ledger and determined the fate of the entire system. Control the temple in Nippur, and you held the legitimate business license for all of Mesopotamia. And this is how that temple system worked. Everything was hereditary. Thanks to thousands of clay tablets dug up from the dusty obscurity by the University of Pennsylvania, we have the human resources file of the Mim family in our hands. This family owned something called a temple prebend. Don't think of a prebend here as a tip or a spiritual blessing. It operated exactly like a piece of hereditary real estate. You held a position at Enlil's temple, and with it came the right to collect taxes, receive barley, silver, and absolute power. The Mim family's records span 6 generations, from 2100 to 1900 BC. These clay tablets are like a spiritual bank statement. Who held what position, how many kilos of barley they received today, who covered a shift when someone was sick, and most importantly, every dispute over a seat was resolved by bringing out the genealogy for comparison. You didn't become a high priest because you had a pious heart, or because you heard the call from above. You became a priest because your father was a priest, and your grandfather was a priest. You got to work for the divine because your veins pumped the exact genetic concentration that the gods accepted. That was inheritance. But the true pinnacle of this genetic power lay in Lagash, where the division between king and priest was completely obliterated. Look at Gudea of Lagash, around 2144 to 2124 BC. This man held the title of Ensi, governor, but simultaneously styled himself the high priest of the god Ningirsu. In the 27 surviving statues of Gudea scattered across museums, he always wears a coldly pious expression. On the massive clay cylinders housed at the Louvre, Gudea left behind a 1,400-line construction report for the Ininu temple. Gudea recounts dreaming that the god Ningirsu appeared, handing him a divine AutoCAD drawing, an architectural blueprint precise to the centimeter. But this god didn't choose Gudea because he was good at math or possessed leadership skills. Throughout the texts, Gudea is obsessed with flaunting his genealogy. Ningirsu didn't look at Gudea's individual resume. The god looked at the favor bestowed upon Gudea's family line, at his blood. And if you think Gudea was just bragging, step back 1 generation prior to the time of King Eannatum. On the bloody stele of the vultures, carving his victory over the city of Umma, Eannatum does not describe himself as someone blessed by the gods. He carved onto stone a biological statement so blunt it's chilling. The seed implanted in the womb by the god Ningirsu. Did you hear the word implanted clearly? This isn't romantic poetry. This is the language of reproduction. It implies that the god Ningirsu directly intervened to ensure Eannatum's conception. It declared that the divine bloodline was a physical fact, a stark biological truth. So how did these rulers maintain that sacred seed from degrading over time? Welcome to Hieros Gamos, the sacred marriage ritual. Every year the king, representing the shepherd god Dumuzi, would participate in a literal mating ritual with the high priestess, representing the goddess Inanna. Faint-hearted mainstream scholars usually call this sympathetic magic, an agricultural pornographic play to pray for good harvests. But put on your dark history lenses. If power truly came from divine genetic code, then this copulation ritual served a much darker and more pragmatic purpose. It was a DNA recharge. The high priestess wasn't just acting. She carried the essence of the goddess within her, and her physical union with the king was a periodic procedure to transmit, or at least ritualistically confirm, the king's existing divine nature. It fortified his legitimacy with the most primal biology. That is why in Mesopotamia, people were obsessed with recording genealogies on clay and burying them carefully. These clay tablets weren't family keepsakes. They were legal proof of who you were. You owned land by deed. You owned slaves by bill of sale. And you possessed the right to determine the lives of tens of thousands of others by your bloodline. To challenge the king was to challenge the genetic code of the gods, a perfect airtight brainwashing system that operated smoothly for over 1,000 years. But our dark story isn't buried under the Mesopotamian sand. This power virus named Divine Bloodline found a way to spread. It crossed the deserts, took root in the Hittite Empire, infected the Persians, slipped into Greek ideology, and finally flowed straight into the veins of the Roman aristocratic elite. And perhaps it is still silently manipulating our modern world. Did you think that when the Mesopotamian city-states collapsed, sinking beneath the blinding dust of the Middle Eastern desert, this genetic caste system died with them? I am Zorro, and I must tell you a brutal truth. True power never dies. It only changes its area code. This virus of divine blood escaped the mud laboratories of the Sumerians, spreading along the routes of conquest, trade, and calculated diplomatic marriages. It became the open source code for every subsequent Western empire. Look at the greatest conquerors in history. Do you think they ruled purely with bloody swords and massive armies? Wrong. They ruled by stealing genealogical records. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great of Persia marched his army into Babylon. His troops could have flattened everything, but Cyrus was an incredibly cunning man. Instead of beating his chest and proclaiming himself a foreign dictator arriving to plunder, he walked into the temple and bowed before the Mesopotamian gods. Cyrus's propaganda inscriptions trumpeted that the gods themselves had chosen him to clean up the incompetent Babylonian rulers. Cyrus carefully inserted himself right into the biological legitimacy framework that had existed for thousands of years. He didn't destroy the system. He penciled his own name into the new CEO position. Over 200 years later, in 331 BC, Greece's golden boy, Alexander the Great, repeated that exact play. Upon crushing Persia and setting foot in Babylon, Alexander immediately headed straight for the temple of the great god Marduk, a Greek guy, suddenly claiming to be the chosen instrument of an Eastern deity. Alexander cleverly hooked his genealogy onto Heracles, the demigod who Greek mythology vaguely hinted had Eastern origins. Do you see this unbreakable pattern? Every seasoned player who seized power in Mesopotamia understood the rules of the game. If you want the populace on their knees, you have to prove your blood is connected to the primal lineages. If you don't have it, fake it. Or better yet, usurp and preserve the records of those bloodlines to pass down to your descendants. And this gene laundering process was executed highly methodically thanks to a Babylonian priest named Berossus. After Alexander died, the empire was carved up. The Greek Seleucid dynasty ruled the Mesopotamian region. They were outsiders, and they needed a valid genealogical certificate in the eyes of the public. So, around 290 BC, they hired Berossus to compile the entire history of Mesopotamia into Greek, the work known as the Babyloniaca. Berossus didn't just translate historical tales. He acted as a genetic smuggler on paper. He translated the entire king list, translated the story of the Great Flood genetic bottleneck, and lifted the exact concept of legitimacy from divine blood, injecting it straight into the bloodstream of the Greek intellectual world. From Greece, this power virus aimed straight at the center of the ancient world, Rome. Take a look at the Roman aristocracy, the arrogant patrician families. They didn't claim to be descendants of Italian peninsula farmers. No, they insisted they originated from the survivors of Troy. Why Troy? The answer lies in this ruthless genealogical chain. Troy was located in Anatolia. Anatolia was within the cultural and control sphere of the Hittites. And the Hittites, as the clay tablets have irrefutably proven, executed countless marriage alliances with Mesopotamian royal families carrying the god blood. The genealogical chain was perfectly connected. Those toga-wearing Roman senators, endlessly pontificating about law and the Republic, were actually leaning on the genetic shadow of the ancient Anunnaki. The Mesopotamian system was completely compatible with Rome's ideology of protecting aristocratic bloodlines. But here is the final twist, the truth that will make you shudder. This story doesn't stop at the fall of Rome. When we set aside these ancient genealogies and look at modern genetic DNA studies on elite populations, the nobility, and European royalty, scientists are finding astonishing evidence. Specific DNA branches, genetic concentrations, and biological markers are entirely consistent with these ancient genealogical claims. The people holding power today, manipulating global economics and politics behind closed doors, may no longer wear gold-studded capes or offer sheep as sacrifices to the god Enlil, but in their veins, through thousands of years of controlled breeding, endogamy, and preserving genetic concentration, could it be that the god blood-stained clay from the dawn of time is still flowing? The Great Flood couldn't wipe them out. Time couldn't fade them. That system simply evolved. Did you think the obsession with blue blood, with gilded coats of arms, or the so-called divine right of kings in medieval Europe was something they invented themselves? Oh no. Don't overestimate the creativity of the Western nobility like that. The ironic truth is, this game of dividing classes by bloodline is just a cheap cover version, a continuation of a system established, stamped, and sealed exactly 5,000 years ago on the bloody lands of Mesopotamia. But at Dark History, we don't believe in romantic hearsay. Like a murder case, we need the murder weapon. We need physical evidence. And believe me, these ancient dynasties didn't hide their origins. They didn't whisper it in the dark. They carved it in stone. They turned their divine origins into law. Welcome to the world of cylinder seals. If you were a lowly merchant in ancient Mesopotamia, every sales contract of yours had to be sealed with this thing. Not with flashy red candle wax like the later European lords, but in clay. These tiny stone cylinders were carved in reverse relief, and each one was completely unique. It was your signature. Roll it out and boom, congratulations, you were legally bound to whatever cuneiform mess was on there. For the peasantry, seals only had boring pictures of plants and animals. But for the elite, it was a grandiose resume, name, title, and the god backing them. And for royalty, it wasn't a signature. It was a birth certificate proving they carried divine genes. If you walk into the largest museums in the world today, you will see a motif repeated to the point of obsession. A king standing before a god. The god hands him the rod and the ring, symbols of order, justice, and of course the power of life and death. But strain your eyes and look closely. The posture and the proportions. The king is not prostrating, cowering, or trembling like a puppy before a great master. No. He stands straight. He is nearly as massive as the god. The interaction between them is direct, intimate, bold, and reeks of family. The king wears a horned crown, the accessory of power originally reserved exclusively for the heavenly realm. They are not saying, "I am blessed by the gods." They are saying, "The gods and I are family." Look at this guy, Ur-Nammu, the founder of the third dynasty of Ur. On the seal, he is receiving the tools of the trade from the moon god Nana. He wears the horned crown. And right in front of his name is a tiny divine determinative symbol called Dingir, an exclusive VIP pass of the gods. Every time Ur-Nammu rolled this seal onto a treaty or a decree, he was screaming in the faces of his subjects. My power flows from the veins of my father, the god Nana. And if you thought Ur-Nammu was arrogant, let me introduce Naram-Sin of Akkad, the one who erected the victory stele in 2250 BC. Look at him. He is more massive than everyone else. He tramples his enemies. But the key lies on his head. Count the horns on his crown. In Mesopotamian art, the more horns, the higher your rank in heaven. Naram-Sin placed it on his own head. The inscription calls him the god of Akkad, not spokesperson for the gods, not the chosen one, but God, period. Mainstream history, that dry history still putting you to sleep, calls it hubris syndrome. They say Naram-Sin crossed the line, and the subsequent disasters and rebellions were the price paid for blasphemy. But Zorro tilts his head, eyes sharp as knives. What if we flip the problem around? What if Naram-Sin wasn't crazy at all? What if he truly knew what the hell the blood flowing inside him was? His grandfather, Sargon the Great, had hoarded that divine gene through conquests. His father married princesses from ancient dynasties. His aunt was the high priestess Enheduanna. Perhaps Naram-Sin just did some basic genetic math. He realized he had enough percentage of god blood to proclaim himself a lord. Whether he was right or delusional, the most terrifying truth is, the people believed him. They built temples for Naram-Sin while he was still alive. The priests didn't stone him. They obediently offered sacrifices and prayed to this living flesh god for protection. And it wasn't just the show-offs like Naram-Sin or Shulgi, who literally hired people to write songs praising him as the offspring of the gods. Look at Gudea of Lagash. He seemed more modest. He carved 27 statues depicting himself as a pious servant with hands clasped in prayer. But don't let that exterior fool you. His inscriptions constantly repeat a refrain. The god Ningirsu chose me because of my family. See? The favor wasn't based on personal goodness. It was based on the DNA diagram. The evidence is scattered everywhere, from clay contracts tossed in the mud to towering monuments in the middle of town squares. The ancient Mesopotamians did not speak in metaphors. They weren't playing with words. They genuinely believed that political power was something birthed from the ovaries and sperm of the gods. And guess what? Alexander the Great, the conquerors of Persia, and later the entire West, not a single one destroyed that system. They copied it. They craved it. They packaged that paranoid biological logic and brought it back to Europe. What do you think is needed to maintain a divine empire? Magic? Lightning bolts striking down from the sky? Or fire-breathing dragons? The harsh reality is much more boring. They used accounting. That's right. Diligent, nearsighted scribes sitting around scraping clay all day long. If you want to manage something as precious as divine blood without letting it get diluted by some anonymous shepherd, you can't rely on memory. You need math. You need data. Welcome to the third dynasty of Ur, also known as Ur III. They were the absolute peak of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD, when it came to record keeping. Currently, we have our hands on about 120,000 administrative clay tablets from this period. Remember, 120,000 is not an estimate. That's what's sitting right there in museum display cases. And scholars say this surviving number of artifacts represents only 1 to 2% of the original archive. Do the basic math. If 120,000 is only 1%, then they wrote about 6 million texts. 6 million. What the hell were they recording so much of? Everything. The amount of grain issued to builders, weaving quotas, how many cows were transferred from one temple to another, the volume of beer brewed, taxes. But hidden amidst that mess of boring retail receipts was a ruthless, chillingly detailed royal genealogy tracking system. It wasn't scattered notes like, "Oh, the king just had another prince." No, it was a systematic database. Look at the family of Ur-Nammu, the guy with the horned crown I mentioned. In 2112 BC, he established the dynasty. Before he died, the system closed the ledger. His son Shulgi was the crown prince. No arguments, no bloody civil wars like Game of Thrones. Shulgi took the throne and ruled for 48 years, a massive number back then. He had many wives, and at least 6 children were clearly certified on clay. The scribes tracked the career of every single one. Amar-Sin, the eldest, was tossed out to be the governor of Ur to learn the ropes while his father was still alive. When Shulgi died, Amar-Sin took over, smooth as a greased machine. Amar-Sin was king for 9 years. But when he died, the throne didn't pass to his son. It jumped to his younger brother, Shusin. Why? Simple system optimization. If Amar-Sin's son was too young, handing power to a child was suicide. So the uncle, Shusin, was pushed up to maintain stability. Shusin ruled for 9 years, paving the way for his own son, Ibisin, to succeed him. 5 kings, 4 transfers of power, 90 uninterrupted years, no usurpers, no outsiders interfering. Everything was tightly bound within a strictly monitored network of bloodlines. But the real horror doesn't lie with the men sitting on the throne. The real game was played with the daughters. Shulgi's princesses weren't raised to be decorative. They were genetic pawns. The texts record that they were married off to the governors of the largest cities, Susa, Eshnuna, Anshan. Dowries, wedding gifts, all were itemized. History books will put you to sleep with the phrase political alliances, that marrying off daughters would make the tribal leaders less rebellious. So naive. Look deeper. That wasn't diplomacy. That was a seeding campaign. Every pregnant princess was an incubator, spreading the royal bloodline, or divine bloodline, rooting it into the leadership class in distant lands. Come on, back to math. Get your calculators out. If Shulgi had 6 children, and each of them had 6 children, we have 36 grandchildren. Each grandchild has 6 kids. Boom. 216 great-grandchildren. Over 3 or 4 generations, a single king spawned hundreds of descendants. What did they do? They didn't become kings, but they were royalty. They became military generals. They became temple officials. They ran the provinces. They, in turn, married the local elites. In the blink of an eye, every family with any clout in this empire possessed a little bit of divine horned DNA. The boundary between royalty and nobility became a matter of percentage, no longer a matter of essence. And this is where everything connects. Your status in this society, the right to be an official, the right to marry, the right to own land, all depended on you proving your genealogy. That is why the temple kept the genealogical ledgers right next to the land deeds. They served the exact same function, proving ownership. You owned an acre of field thanks to a clay will. You owned power thanks to a clay genealogy proving your ancestors had god blood. The Mesopotamian scribes didn't accept oral fairy tales like, "My great-grandmother told me so." They needed real names, dates, cross-referencing from multiple archives. The exact same clerk who carefully recorded the transfer of 4,823 sheep to Drehem in March was the exact same guy who recorded Prince Amar-Sin is appointed governor. There was no room for ambiguity. This system was too effective to die with Ur III. When the empire collapsed, the system survived. The Aeson inherited it. Then the Babylonians, the Kassites, the Assyrians, Neo-Babylonians, and even the Persians. Thousands of years, tens of thousands of generations. A massive machine just to track blood. You might ask yourself, why were they so obsessed with this? Was it purely for simple political power, or was it because they truly knew what the origin of the blood flowing in their veins was? We have seen how they counted every generation, how they recorded genealogical ledgers more carefully than modern real estate deeds. But now, I need you to take a deep breath and put away your modern secular lenses. Because we are about to enter a territory where academic historians usually love to plug their ears, close their eyes, and scream, "Don't believe it, it's just a metaphor." But think back. Were those tedious administrative clay tablets we just examined metaphorical? No. So why, when the texts talk about how these bloodlines were created, do we suddenly treat them as bedtime fairy tales? They recorded the physical union between gods and humans. And believe me, it wasn't some hollow spiritual convergence. They described it as literal breeding contracts with specific individuals on specific beds, producing specific genetic products. Sumer and Akkad are littered with such records. The goddess Inanna defied her family to marry a shepherd king named Dumuzi. The god Enlil hunted down Ninlil, and the result was the birth of the moon god Nanna. Do you think that's romantic poetry? Look at the Epic of Gilgamesh. This text declares that Gilgamesh's mother was a goddess and his father was a mortal, or demigod. And how does it describe him? Quoting verbatim, 2/3 of him is God, 1/3 is human. Have you ever seen a poet calculate fractions like a genetic engineer? 2/3. Divinity here is measured, quantified, and inherited. That is not mythology. That is the mathematical mindset of biological genetics, and this paranoia is global. Open the Bible, Genesis 6, 1-4. The sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose, and the Nephilim were on the earth. Jewish tradition calls them the heroes of old. Go to Greece, Heracles, Achilles, Perseus. Every muscle-bound hero had a father or mother on Mount Olympus. Hinduism? The royal dynasties claim to be direct descendants of the sun god and the moon god. Even the 13th century Norse prose Edda bluntly spills the beans. Odin was actually just a chieftain from Troy, Anatolia, who migrated north and was worshipped as a god by the wild tribes there. This pattern is everywhere. So, ladies and gentlemen of the dark history jury, how are we supposed to interpret this? I will lay out 3 verdicts for you here. Pick your poison. The first verdict, academia's safe view, purely mythological. They say, oh please, the gods are just personified lightning and the sun. Mixing god blood with human blood is merely a metaphor for the merging of religion and politics. Sounds reasonable to our secular minds, right? But its loophole is as massive as a volcanic crater. If it's just a metaphor, why did they record royal genealogies with the legal precision of a commercial contract? Why use fractions like 2/3 God, which only makes sense in a crossbreeding math problem? Why did that political matchmaking machine run frantically for thousands of years if the blood didn't actually possess something special? The second verdict, the Atlantis scenario, advanced human civilization. This hypothesis suggests that before the devastating Great Flood of 2900 BC, there was a highly advanced human civilization. When the waters receded, the survivors brought their knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and metallurgy to Mesopotamia. In the eyes of the wild, Stone Age date farmers, these people with knowledge were practically gods falling from the sky. The divine bloodline in this case is the genetic legacy of a physically and intellectually superior human race. That is why royalty had to interbreed to protect this superior gene pool. Very logical. No magic required. But if they were so advanced, where are their concrete ruins, steel reinforcements, or nuclear reactors? There isn't a single piece of archaeological evidence proving their existence. The third verdict, the Area 51 of the ancient world, non-human intervention. This is where you put on your tinfoil anti-electromagnetic wave suit. Sumerian texts called them the Anunnaki, those who came down from the heavens to earth. Descriptions say they were incredibly tall, radiant, and lived for tens of thousands of years. The legends about molding humans from clay mixed with god blood don't sound like poetry. They sound like a genetic engineering document. DNA manipulation. Ancient royalty were the F1, F2 generations of this biological laboratory. They were obsessed with recording genealogies because they knew exactly what extraterrestrial or interdimensional material was coursing through their veins. The 2/3 fraction is precisely a genetic admixture ratio. The weakness? It's glaringly obvious. It's a crazy claim that demands crazy evidence. And unless you have a formaldehyde-soaked alien corpse hidden under your bed, we are completely in the dark regarding physical evidence. You see, we are walking a tightrope across the abyss of history. We cannot prove which of these three is the absolute truth. But it doesn't matter, because this ambiguity does not change the final verdict. Look at the undeniable facts. They did believe that bloodline was biologically real. They did record it like machines. They did maintain it through arranged marriages, and they did consolidate all religious and political power into the hands of these specific families. Whether god blood was symbolic PR, the genes of prehistoric intellectuals, or the remnants of an outer space laboratory, the consequence is singular. A small group of family lines held the rulership of the world at that time, and the most hair-raising question is, did they stop when Mesopotamia collapsed? Not at all. They packed their bags, brought their genealogical ledgers, and began the migration west. Their destination? The very cradle of modern Europe. This is where history strips off its ridiculous mythological coat and reveals a skeleton made of hard data, where ancient clay tablets collide with modern DNA research, where fairy tales about gods give way to measurable numbers. We are going to track the footprints of the 12 Mesopotamian bloodlines. We will follow that divine genome, watching how it crossed space and time, migrating west, not with blind faith, but with 3 deadly weapons: explicit historical texts, archaeological evidence dug from the earth, and ancient admixed DNA sequencing. The first link in this bloody chain, the Hittite Empire. From about 1600 to 1180 BC, the Hittites dominated Anatolia. Textbooks say they were migrating Indo-Europeans who conquered the natives and then assimilated Mesopotamian culture. Assimilated sounds so gentle, like you're borrowing a recipe from a neighbor. But they didn't just borrow religion or political systems, they borrowed blood. They grafted their own bloodlines directly into that divine network. If you look at clay tablet KB0110, dug up at Hattusa, currently resting obediently in the Berlin Museum, you will read a contract from 1340 BC. The daughter of the Hittite king Suppiluliuma I was married off to the Babylonian king Bernaburiash II. Clay tablet Kub 37 records a Hittite prince marrying a Kassite princess of Babylon. And don't forget the Amarna letters, a treasure trove of diplomatic correspondence from the 14th century BC. They expose a tangled, nauseating, but perfectly calculated web of marriages between the Bronze Age royal families of the Hittites, Babylon, Assyria, Mitanni, and Egypt. Historians call it diplomacy. I call it gene pool preservation. If they all believed the throne was only for those with god blood, then this continuous cross-marrying was the only way to keep that special fluid from being diluted by the peasantry. The second link, from the Hittites to Troy. Troy, where the line between Homer's epic and historical truth was considered a joke, until a crazy archaeologist named Heinrich Schliemann took a pickaxe and dug it up in 1871. In Hittite texts, Troy was called Wilusa. We have the Alexandru Treaty, a clay tablet from 1280 BC recording an agreement between the Hittite king Muwatalli II and Alexandru of Wilusa. This treaty bound Troy as a Hittite vassal. What does that mean? It means the Trojan royal family, yes, the family of King Priam, Hector, and that lovesick fool Paris, was fully inside the massive cultural and genetic circle of Anatolia and Mesopotamia. They were potential breeding partners in that royal network. In 1180 BC, Troy fell. The scorched black archaeological layer 7A perfectly matches the epic's record of destruction. But destroying a city doesn't mean wiping its DNA clean off the map. A portion of the population will flee. Egyptian records complain about the sea peoples, refugees and raiders wandering the Mediterranean after the Bronze Age collapse. Modern genetic studies have caught their tail. Admixed genetic signatures from the Near East appeared in Mediterranean populations right at this chaotic time. And that is when the third link appears. From the ashes of Troy to the throne of the Roman Empire. Rome's founding myth claims a Trojan prince named Aeneas led the survivors fleeing to Italy. Hold on. Let's stop for a second and check this guy Aeneas's background. His father was Anchises, a mortal. His mother was the goddess Venus. Ding, ding, ding. Do you smell something familiar? A chillingly precise god-human admixture ratio, repeating the exact formula of Gilgamesh on the banks of the Tigris. Virgil's epic, the Aeneid, was written during Emperor Augustus's reign to glorify his lineage from Aeneas through the Julian clan, gens Julia. Many scoffers argue that Virgil was just a cunning hack, inventing this story to flatter the emperor. Fatal mistake. Julius Caesar's family had been claiming this god blood, Trojan root, centuries before the Roman Empire was even established. And they weren't alone. Rome's patrician elite were all crazy for this refugee label. The Claudii family thumped their chests claiming descent from Colossus, of Sabine/Trojan origin. The Aemili falsely claimed to be the great-grandsons of Aeneas's son. The historian Livy, when writing Ab Urbe Condita, History of Rome from its foundation, did not treat the Trojan origin as a romantic poem. He treated it as documented historical fact. Even Augustus the Great was free and wealthy enough to throw money at rebuilding the city of Ilion, ancient Troy, just to show filial piety to his ancestral homeland. Do you think an emperor ruling half the world burns money on a symbolic cosplay stunt? No. They were defending the legitimacy certificate of their bloodline. Symbols can change. The names of gods can be translated into other languages. But the core logic is immortal. Bloodline births power, and authority must be proven by genealogy. The chain linking the cylinder seals rolled on Mesopotamian mud to the wax seals stamping Roman emperors' documents was never broken. They escaped. They took that genome and planted it into the fertile soil of Europe. And the most brutal question remaining is, which elite families, wearing suits and sitting in closed-door boardrooms today, currently have that blood flowing through their veins? Close your eyes. Imagine you are standing amidst the charred ruins of legendary Troy. Acrid smoke billows up, corpses are strewn everywhere, and the victors, the Greeks, are roaring in celebration. Troy has fallen. The survivors are nothing but a ragged group of refugees, desperately boarding ships to flee. Yet by some ridiculous miracle of history, the descendants of those stateless refugees ended up becoming the master rulers of the entire Western world. You don't believe it? Look at the Roman Empire. The Romans, those proud toga wearers who trampled over Greek civilization to build their own empire, constantly asserted a bizarre claim: we are the descendants of Troy. Why? Think about it. Why would the people standing on top of the world want to claim descent from a bunch of defeated remnants? According to the standard explanation that university professors use to put us to sleep, it was a cheap PR stunt. Rome needed an origin story glamorous enough to match the prestigious Greek mythological world. But unfortunately, they bitterly hated the Greeks because the two sides fought constantly. So they chose Troy, Greece's mortal enemy, as their ancestors. A perfect political chess move. The enemy of my enemy is my father. But what if I told you that wasn't a PR play? What happens if they genuinely believed it, or more terrifyingly, if it was the truth? Ancient records indicate that the Trojan refugees dragged themselves to the Italian peninsula. Through trickery, violence, and calculated marriages, they interbred with the native Italic tribes. The descendants of this mixed seed were none other than the patrician class, the absolute elite nobility of Rome. The claims of a divine bloodline transferred from Mesopotamia through the Hittite Empire, gathering in Troy, and finally taking root in Rome might sound like a sci-fi novel. But hold on. The genetic evidence we'll dig up later is grinning at our skepticism because it's entirely plausible. And then the wheel of time crushed everything. In 476 AD, the Roman Empire collapsed. City walls shattered, emperors were deposed, and the glorious era was reduced to ashes. The Germanic barbarians swept down from the dark northern forests, seizing Europe. Did you think that when the empire died, the ruling bloodline would go extinct too? Oh, you're too naive. Political continuity can be severed, but the awareness of genealogy, the voodoo magic of power, never dies. Those hairy Germanic kings, the ones who just yesterday were drinking from human skulls, suddenly draped themselves in glittering Roman titles. Their thirst for power was one thing, but they craved something even more terrifying. They claimed that they too carried Roman blood. And in the peak of irony, the Franks, the ancestors of the dominant powers across medieval Europe, thumped their chests and proclaimed, "We also originated from Troy." Yes, you heard that right. Open the 7th century Chronicle of Fredegar and see for yourself. The author solemnly recorded that the Franks were descendants of Francio, a son of King Priam of Troy. When Troy fell, Francio didn't die. He dragged the refugees fleeing for their lives all the way to the Rhine River region, and boom, they became the Franks. By the 8th century, the Liber Historiae Francorum regurgitated this argument as a fundamental truth. Even Gregory of Tours' History of the Franks, 6th century, carefully mapped out the genealogy of the powerful Merovingian dynasty, presenting it as undeniable historical fact. Now let your detective mind work. Why would the barbarians cling to the rotting corpse of Troy? Once again, academia will shrug and say, just copying homework. Rome claimed Trojan roots and Rome was awesome, so the Franks claimed Trojan roots to gain legitimacy. Sounds very logical. But the world of dark history doesn't like boring answers like that. There is a second hypothesis, far darker and more pragmatic. The Franks were actually descendants from the exact same wave of Mediterranean Anatolian migration that birthed the Roman aristocracy. Or, after seizing power, they coerced and intermarried with the surviving Roman noble families, the ones who already carried that divine genealogy. The Merovingian dynasty ruled the Franks from 481 to 751. When they were overthrown by the Carolingians, what did those cunning Carolingians do? Slaughter everyone? No, they took the Merovingian women to their beds, marrying into that bloodline to keep the genealogical chain unbroken, regardless of the dynasty's name changing. And it doesn't stop there. This genealogy game spread like a virus. Do you know the House of Habsburg, the jutting-jawed ones who ruled Europe through incestuous marriages from 1282 to 1918? They traced their ancestry back through countless branches of medieval nobility. And guess what the final destination was? Still the Merovingians, and of course dragging right back to the Trojan-Roman route. Even the modern British royal family isn't exempt from this vortex. They trace their bloodline through the Anglo-Saxon kings who claim to be the offspring of the god Woden, also known as the great Norse god Odin. But wait, what do gods have to do with history? In 1220, the scholar Snorri Sturluson dumped a bucket of cold water on mythologists with his prose Edda. He wrote plainly that Odin's true origin wasn't in some fairy tale Valhalla, but in Anatolia, exactly in the region of Troy, before this god led his army migrating north. So there you have it, my friend. We have a slew of rotting documents spanning centuries, all pointing to a single point. The nobility of all Europe adamantly asserted they originated from the east, passed through Troy, and took root in the ancient Near East. Were they crazy, suffering from megalomania? Or has there truly been a secret biological red thread manipulating world power for the past 5,000 years? Paper can lie. The oaths of kings can be garbage. But there is one thing that never knows how to lie. DNA code. Next time, we will crack open the ancient tombs and see how genetic science slaps history right in the face. In 2018, Nature magazine, the cathedral of the scientific world, published a shocking study by Olalde et al. On the genomic transformation of northwestern Europe. The evidence pointed out that the Bell Beaker culture, around 2800 to 1800 BC, brought a haplogroup named R1b surging into Western Europe from the brutal Pontic-Caspian steppe. R1b originated from between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, swept through Anatolia, where Troy is located, crossed the Caucasus Mountains, and took root in Europe. Today, R1b is the most common Y chromosome haplogroup in the West. But here is the chilling twist. R1b was not distributed evenly like slicing a pie. It appeared with heavy concentration in aristocratic families with documented records, vastly higher than among the lowly, voiceless peasantry. What picture do you see here? An invasion migration by the Bronze Age elite, establishing dominance and locking their own bloodline at the top of the pyramid. Don't drop your jaw just yet. We're only getting started. Let's dig up the tombs of the Hallstatt Celtic elite, 800 to 450 BC. Gretzinger's 2024 study in Nature Genetics revealed that 37% of those lying in the tombs carried the haplogroup G2AL497, a marker clearly originating from the Caucasus and the Near East during the Bronze Age. What does 37% in the ruling class compared to a meager rate in the commoners mean? It means the ancestors of many medieval European noble families were actually outsiders carrying Near Eastern blood who climbed on the backs and necks of the natives. But the most fatal evidence lies in Martiniano's 2017 study. This time, scientists looked straight at Bronze Age Anatolia, yes, including legendary Troy itself. The result? In the tombs of the elite back then, haplogroup R1b-Z2103 accounted for a massive 41%. And in the tombs of the poor, a mere 8%. A ruthless genetic stratification existed right from that era. The elite and the commoners in Troy were already biologically distinct species. When Troy fell, the top-tier refugees grabbed these superior genetic traits and fled to Europe. And those are the very markers that took root in the Western nobility later on. Do you see the picture taking shape? Everything fits together so perfectly it's terrifying. DNA doesn't prove that every single name in the Merovingian or Habsburg family tree is absolutely accurate, but it proves with cold steel that their claims of Near Eastern origins were not the product of imagination. If the 12 bloodlines of power from ancient Mesopotamia truly transferred west through the Hittite Empire, through Troy, poured into Rome, and flowed into the veins of the medieval nobility, then genetically, we would see Near Eastern ancestors converging heavily in the European elite and being preserved through morbid endogamy, in-group marriage. And guess what? That is exactly what the microscopes are seeing. King's 2011 research showed that British aristocratic families share an unusually high degree of Y chromosomes. They only married each other, like a wolf pack protecting its breed. Now, let me pull you back to reality and look straight at the families pulling the strings of the modern world. You think the ancient bloodlines are dead? Look at the truth here. The British royal family, Windsor/Hanover, their Saxon ancestors claim to be the offspring of the god Odin. Remember part 1? Odin's Anatolian origin falls under the control of the Hittite culture, those who intermarried with Mesopotamian royalty. Science proves British nobility carries a massive surge of R1b, perfectly matching Bronze Age Near Eastern roots. The House of Bourbon, current Spanish royal family, descendants of the Trojan origin Franks. Their haplogroup has been medically confirmed as R1b-DF27, Leroy 2013. Perfect for a steppe and Anatolian origin. The House of Habsburg, the one-time masters of Europe who claimed Trojan roots. The DNA of their descendants today, Haber 2018, shows sky-high Near Eastern markers. The Rothschild family, the absolute pinnacle of banking empires. You thought they were just self-made businessmen from the Frankfurt slums? Their traditional genealogy claims descent from the priest Aaron, 13th century BC. Shocking genetic evidence. Haplogroup J, 1p58, the Cohen modal haplotype, appears at a rate of 46 to 56% in Kohanim lines, pointing directly to Levant/Mesopotamian origins 3,000 years ago. If this Levite priesthood blended with the priestly traditions of ancient Nippur and Lagash temples, then the Rothschilds are the inheritors of the priest-king network from the dawn of civilization. They interbred to protect that bloodline, a spine-chillingly ancient awareness of genealogy. The Rockefeller family, the symbol of American oil plutocrats. Self-made? Don't be naive. The New England Historic Genealogical Society exposed the Rockefeller ancestors. They originated from the 12th century French nobility of Languedoc, Roquefeuille. This Roquefeuille name intermarried with Carolingian nobility, leading back to the Merovingians, to Troy, and to Mesopotamia. Their genetic marker is almost certainly R1b. The overarching pattern has emerged, exposed under a blinding light. Mere wealth cannot buy a ticket into the core of the elite. American or European financial and industrial dynasties, if they didn't directly carry Western noble blood with ancient Near Eastern roots, frantically intermarried to merge into that network within just 1 or 2 generations. What are they silently protecting? Why is this power network so obsessed with Eastern blood? And does this octopus tentacle only reach west, or has it been strangling the East since time immemorial? Don't look away. This game is much bigger than Europe. Hold your breath because we are about to turn our heads toward Persia, India, and even the throne of the Chinese emperor. Let's start with the Persian Empire. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great marched his army and crushed Babylon. According to the normal logic of conquerors, you take a city, you burn it to the ground, and you erect a statue of yourself. But not Cyrus. He didn't destroy Mesopotamia. He swallowed it whole. Have you ever heard of the Cyrus cylinder sitting proudly in the British Museum? It is a block of clay inscribed with brazen yet incredibly brilliant proclamations. On it, Cyrus doesn't say, "I am the strongest, I behead your kings." No. He wrote, "Marduk, the supreme god of Babylon, chose me to liberate the city from the incompetent king Nabonidus." Do you see the cunning here? Cyrus doesn't identify as a foreign invader. He places himself squarely within the framework of Mesopotamian legitimacy. He is the rightful heir appointed by the gods. And then Darius I took the throne, carving his genealogy onto the towering Behistun cliff. "I am Darius, the great king, king of kings." Wait, king of kings? That is the exact title that Assyrian and Babylonian tyrants used centuries prior. Darius copied the copyright of the Mesopotamian system verbatim. Persian nobility frantically intermarried with the remnant Mesopotamian elite. Cyrus's son married the daughter of the Babylonian king. They absorbed the genealogical claims, maintaining an obsessive family record just like the masters in Nippur or Lagash. But Persia was still a neighbor. Let's go further, across the harsh mountain ranges to India. Here, coincidence turns into a thorny truth. Ancient Indian civilization developed a system of divine kingship so laughably similar to Mesopotamia, despite direct contact being extremely minimal. The Vedic texts record two supreme ruling lineages, the Solar Dynasty and the Lunar Dynasty. Who was the founder of the Solar Dynasty? Manu, the survivor of the Great Flood. Hold on. Sounds familiar? The flood survivor becomes the ancestor of the new generation's royalty. That is exactly the story of Ziusudra in Mesopotamia, and later Noah in the Bible. Indian epics even feature the concept of fractional divinity, heroes carrying a portion of god blood, exactly like the Sumerian king Gilgamesh carrying 2/3 divine blood. They weaponize this obsession with blood into the most ruthless weapon in human history, the caste system. Don't call it a social division of labor like in the textbooks. Call it what it is, a biological stratification system. Where you are born is where you die. The Kshatriya class, warriors, kings, claimed divine ancestry to strictly forbid mixing blood with the lower classes. Genetic evidence speaks up once again. Haplogroup R1a, the cousin of Europe's R1b, also originating from the Pontic-Caspian steppe, appears at sky-high rates in the Brahmin and Kshatriya classes in India today. Aryan nomads carrying this superior DNA surged in, established their rule, and used religion to lock down the bloodlines. So what about China? The land of the Asian dragons. In China, they had a concept that sounds very democratic and humane: the mandate of heaven. This concept states that heaven grants the right to rule to the worthy. If the king is cruel, heaven will revoke the mandate and hand it to another family. In theory, it allows for a transfer of power not based on blood, but that is just a cunning theory. Look at the reality. The Shang dynasty, 1600 to 1046 BC, used oracle bones, animal bones, turtle shells, to communicate with the gods, slaughtering thousands of slaves for live sacrifices, showing they believed their blood stood a tier above humanity. When the Zhou dynasty overthrew the Shang, using the excuse of the mandate of heaven, they still had to drag out genealogical records, proving they were descendants of ancient mythical kings. Even Zhu Yuanzhang, the founder of the great Ming dynasty, started out as a dirt-poor peasant and a beggar monk. Do you think he was proud of his proletarian origins? No. As soon as he sat on the blood-soaked throne, he immediately ordered historians to mold a grandiose genealogy, firmly tying his roots to ancient aristocratic families. In China, the emperor didn't claim to be a god, but they claimed to be the Son of Heaven, the only one with the right to act as the sacrificial intermediary between earth and heaven. This model differs not one bit from the priest-king role in Mesopotamia. So, what are we looking at on the world map? From Mesopotamia to Egypt, where pharaohs were living gods, over to India, spreading to China, flying all the way to the Americas with the Maya, Aztec, then sweeping across the Pacific Islands or the Japanese royal family. Everywhere on Earth, divine kingship and the obsession with hereditary bloodlines ruled absolutely. Where does this coincidence come from? Academic minds are split into three factions. The first argues it's a universal human model. Humans everywhere are greedy, and when they gain power, they all invent the deification trick to oppress others. The second believes in diffusion. Mesopotamia was the cradle, and from there this ideology spread through trade and war like a contagious disease. And the third faction, those considered heretics, believe in a common ancient origin. A global pre-Sumerian civilization established this blood-ruling system, and when it collapsed after a catastrophe, its shattered fragments created dynasties all over the world. The evidence is not enough to nail down the final answer, but there is an undeniable truth. The curtain of power based on bloodline draped over the entire ancient world. Now, take a deep breath. Ancient empires have fallen. Kings who proclaimed themselves divine have turned to dust. But do you really think that system died? Do you think the emperors and the self-proclaimed divine kings are dead? Do you think we are living in an era of democracy, of self-made billionaires? Oh, what sweet naivety. They haven't disappeared. They just took off their togas and threw on expensive Brioni suits instead. Let's start with those who show their faces, the European royal families. Even though they no longer publicly behead commoners, they still maintain an iron grip on massive wealth, cultural influence, and most importantly, thick genealogical ledgers. The British royal family, House of Windsor, the Spanish royal family, House of Bourbon, or the remnants of the Habsburg Empire, they all maintain a common denominator. As I proved with DNA in the previous section, their veins flow with R1b markers, or Bronze Age Near Eastern genetic sequences. They are living museums of an ancient system, but true power today does not lie with kings wearing crowns. It lies in the hands of faceless bosses, and this is where the self-made mask is ripped off. Do you think the Rothschild family is a fairy tale about a poor Jew rising from the Frankfurt slums? Wrong. Their tradition proudly asserts that they are descendants of the Kohanim priestly line, tracing back to Aaron, the brother of Moses, from 3,300 years ago. Genetic evidence has stunned the scientific community. 46% to 56% of those carrying the Kohanim name possess the haplogroup J, 1p58, a marker originating directly from the Levant and ancient Mesopotamia. They are not nouveau riche. If this priestly bloodline once intertwined with the priest-king network in the temples of ancient Mesopotamia, then the Rothschilds are the modern incarnation of those who once ruled the world through theocracy. How did they maintain that bloodline? Through suffocatingly closed endogamous marriages spanning centuries. What about the symbol of American capitalism, the Rockefeller family? The holder of the Standard Oil empire is often hailed as the shining example of the American dream. But when the New England Historic Genealogical Society dug up their roots, what was discovered? John D. Rockefeller originated from the 12th century French nobility of the Languedoc region, the Roquefeuille family. And this Roquefeuille name, ironically, connects directly by marriage to the Carolingian aristocratic network, leading straight back to the Merovingians, those who claim to be the remnants of Troy. Wealth alone has never been enough to buy a ticket into the club. The newly minted money of the Carnegies, Gettys, Astors, or Vanderbilts had to be rapidly laundered by marrying their children off to European aristocratic bloodlines within 1 or 2 generations. Even American political dynasties like the Bush family, tracing their genealogy back to 17th century English nobility, or the Kennedy family, connected to Irish nobility bearing the lineage of legendary Mediterranean kings, are merely chess pieces on a prearranged board. Now, look at what they are monopolizing. Currency, the central banking system. In 1913, a secret meeting on Jekyll Island birthed the U.S. Federal Reserve, the Fed, featuring heavy hitters representing the interests of Morgan, Rockefeller, and Rothschild. Resources, oil and diamonds. Historical extraction privileges have always belonged to corporations with royal charters or aristocratic backing. Media. From the Hearst Empire to News Corp, the power to mold the truth always rests in the hands of families deeply integrated into the elite network. Global governance. The World Economic Forum, WEF, the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, CFR. When analyzing the list of attendees at these closed-door meetings, roughly 40 to 50% carry documented genealogical connections to European nobility. If you draw a network diagram of the elite, you will see a tangled mess of spiderwebs glued together by marriages and interlocking board directorships. There, the average degrees of separation between them is only 3 to 4 people, whereas for us commoners, it's 6 to 7. The core of this network is old blood, while the outer shell consists of the newly wealthy desperately brown-nosing to get their blood mixed in. The million-dollar question now is this a coordinated conspiracy? Are they consciously preserving ancient bloodlines? I'm not going to stuff your head with cheap lizard people conspiracy theories. Let's look at 3 explanatory frameworks based on cold, hard facts. Framework 1. Natural coincidence. The rich hang out together, go to Yale or Oxford together, and then their kids fall in love and marry. The fact that they carry ancient DNA is merely the random result of Bronze Age migrations, and those imposing genealogies are just jewelry for showing off. Logical, easy on the ears, and incredibly naive. It cannot explain why the practice of endogamy was maintained well into the 20th century despite the risk of birthing deformed children, nor why Near Eastern DNA is selectively concentrated in the elite. Framework 2. Conscious network preservation for status. In this view, the elite treat bloodlines like breeding racehorses. They know they are related. They use organizations like Bilderberg to carve up the global pie. They demand purity to maintain upper-class culture and power. New money plus old blood equals real power. But if it was purely for social status, why did they stubbornly cling to Eastern origins during periods when having Eastern roots was a massive political disadvantage, such as during the Crusades? Framework 3. The ancient system is still operating. This is the one that keeps us awake at night. These families know who they are. They know they are the inheritors of the 12 bloodlines of power established in Mesopotamia. Genetic science has confirmed the existence of ancient Near Eastern DNA in their veins, ruthlessly matching what their genealogies have recorded for 5,000 years. The system of ruling by blood, born at the dawn of civilization, never died. It simply evolved, hiding behind shell companies and tax-exempt investment funds. Imagine this. You hold supreme power in your hands. Your wealth could buy small countries, and you could choose to marry any flawless man or woman on the planet. So what would you do? You certainly wouldn't choose to marry your own biological first cousin, only to give birth to children riddled with genetic defects, right? Sounds insane and illogical, doesn't it? But welcome to the history of the elite. If claims of divine pedigrees or royal bloodlines were just cheap fabrications to bamboozle the peasant masses, we would never see any genetic correlation among them. But what is the reality? We find chillingly clear evidence. That correlation points to one truth. These claims are genuinely preserving some shared ancestral origin. The practice of endogamy, meaning exclusively marrying and breeding within the same family line, has blatantly persisted despite the devastatingly catastrophic costs. Look at the European royal families. They turned a blind eye to science, executing incestuous marriages right up to the 20th century, despite the screaming alarms of obvious genetic health problems. We have the infamous Habsburg jaw, a deformity so severe that kings couldn't even close their mouths or chew their food normally. We have hemophilia spreading like a cruel curse through the palaces of Britain, Russia, and Spain. Why? Why would the most cunning, most powerful people destroy their own breed? The answer is simple, yet covered in thorns. They prioritized blood purity over physical health. This act of gambling with death offers us a core clue. They believe that something incredibly important, sacred, and vital for survival is being preserved in every one of their cells. You see, the persistent survival of this genealogical system is a bizarre human anomaly. Look out the window. Most ancient institutions have vanished into thin air. The majestic languages that once ruled the world are now just dead characters. Religions mutate, obsolete technologies are tossed into the dustbin of history, and great empires crumble into piles of rubble. However, note this point. The awareness of genealogy within elite families remains towering and unscathed. This concept survived from the dusty plains of ancient Mesopotamia, walked through a series of civilizational collapses, survived bloody religious conversions, and smiled its way through political revolutions that beheaded kings. Let's use our detective reasoning here. Why would a single cultural trait possess such fierce vitality if it wasn't built on some foundation of truth? Don't be naive enough to think that you and they read the same history books. Elite families have privileged access to treasure troves of information that people like you and I aren't even allowed to know exist. These are heavily guarded family archives, private libraries shrouded in shadows, and hereditary organizations, such as certain branches of the Freemasons designed exclusively for the nobility. They may very well be preserving ancient knowledge that has never been and never will be revealed to mainstream historians. Elite families likely know exactly which ancient origins their ancestors connect to, simply because they have been keeping private records for thousands of years. Their behavior is not merely social arrogance or nouveau riche snobbery. It runs much deeper than that. If you don't believe it, look at the direction the massive flows of money take. Why did the absolute top-tier elite families pour unimaginable sums to fund archaeological excavations way out in remote Mesopotamia? Why do they maintain an obsessive connection to specific ancient sites? Open the files. We have the involvement of the notorious Rothschild family in early archaeological digs. We have the special interest, almost an obsession, of the Habsburg family regarding ancient history. And don't forget the British royal family's patronage of institutions studying the ancient Near East. Do you think this is just the elegant hobby of people with too much money? The random interests of plutocrats who like collecting antiques? No. In the world of dark history, nothing is random. These actions could absolutely reflect a profound awareness of connection. They weren't looking for artifacts to put on display. They were looking for the traces of their own ancestors beneath the millennial sands of Mesopotamia. On the surface, our world looks very free and modern, right? Towering steel and glass skyscrapers, electronic stock markets ticking numbers every second, flashy artificial intelligence algorithms. But take up the historical scalpel and peel back that camouflage. What do you see underneath? You will see something that will make you shudder. The modern system that you live in, dedicate yourself to, and toil for every day, is actually just a sophisticated carbon copy of the ancient power system. It never vanished. It just changed clothes. Look at how the money flows. In the past, thousands of years ago, wealth and power were transferred through temple prebends in Mesopotamia. Today, welcome to the era of family trusts hiding behind tax havens and Swiss banking laws. How do the strategic marriages tying mega corporations together today differ from the royal marriage alliances of antiquity? Not by a single millimeter, they just swapped crowns for shares. The closed-off elite organizations, the underground billionaire clubs coordinating global policy? We are staring straight at the reincarnated shadows of the ancient councils of elders and priestly assemblies. This structural similarity is not just a coincidence. It is so astonishing, sharp, and cold that either this is the greatest random convergence in human history, or it is a blueprint of power designed thousands of years ago and preserved flawlessly to this very day. And whether you believe in conspiracy theories or not, just look at their behavior. They act as if they believe in it absolutely. Even if we can't plant bugs in the elite's bedrooms or closed-door boardrooms to hear them whisper, we can still use our detective eyes to observe what they do. The complex, miles-long genealogies maintained at an exorbitant cost, the exclusive private education that doesn't just teach macroeconomics, but places an obsessive emphasis on family history. At the absolute apex of that pyramid, social distinction isn't based on how many billions of dollars you have in your account. If you only have money, you are just a new money upstart, nouveau riche. In that world, class is determined by who your ancestors were. Bloodline, not dollars, is the true passport. But as seekers of truth, we must keep a cool head. Let's place this framework on the scale. What are the strengths of this hypothesis? It is so perfect that it explains all the anomalous patterns we have observed, from the massive hordes of genealogical documents to the DNA genetic evidence, to the pattern of endogamous marriages and the extreme concentration of power. It answers the most difficult question: why did the elite defy death and genetic disease to maintain endogamy? From a purely economic standpoint, it was a stupid investment. But from the standpoint of preserving purity, it was a mission of survival. It explains why this aristocratic plutocrat system remains stubbornly impervious to the tsunamis of history that have crushed every other institution. They don't treat ancient texts as bedtime myths for children. They treat them as legal documents of inheritance. But where is the weakness? Don't rush to put that tinfoil hat on your head. The loophole in this theory is that it requires us to swallow a very bitter pill, that those ancient bloodlines actually possessed some mystical, biological, or metaphysical significance. And ironically, we lack direct evidence for that. If we aren't careful, this entire investigation will be tossed into the trash bin labeled conspiracy theory. If bloodline truly matters, then why? How does the quantity of that divine blood or ancient blood differ quantitatively from the blood of a carpenter or an office worker? What makes it special? What is the scientific mechanism behind it? Their silence is the biggest wall. Nevertheless, when faced with the inexplicable, cling tightly to the naked facts. What can we confidently conclude? We cannot definitively prove what is absolutely true, but measurable evidence doesn't lie. First, the elite maintain extensive genealogical records. That is a fact. Whether that genealogy is 100% accurate or partially fabricated, they still clutch them like treasures. Second, The marriage pattern within the elite network is not random. Their rate of intermarriage is vastly higher than normal probability, creating impenetrable genetic fortresses. Third, scientific data corroborates this. Genetic evidence has pointed to ancient Near Eastern origins lurking in the genomes of European elite populations. This ancestry is not distributed randomly on the street. It is concentrated in specific families. And finally, the supreme power of the world is consistently concentrated in the hands of families with claims to ancient ancestry. You can observe this clearly in the board compositions of megacorporations, apex political positions, and world-shaping organizations. The current system. It resembles the blood-based power structure of ancient Mesopotamia so much that it gives me the chills. Is this a natural elite reproduction in a big fish eats little fish style? Is it a consciously coordinated maintenance of a network? Or is it truly an ancient bloodline system being strictly preserved? Each of us will have to choose a red pill for ourselves. But there is one undeniable thing. The awareness of bloodline exists in the minds of the elite. It shapes their behavior and correlates directly with the extreme concentration of power. The question here, my friends, is not, do powerful families exist? Any fool would nod yes. Our real question is, why these specific families? Is it just the result of inherited wealth and social advantage? Just harmoniously coordinated special interest relationships? Or hidden deep within their veins, do ancient bloodlines truly carry something incredibly important, an extraordinary proclamation echoing from antiquity? Before you deliver the final verdict that I am a madman embracing a conspiracy theory, let's run a test. Put the magnifying glass down and look at the big picture. Stop asking where power comes from and ask, who is holding it where, and where does their genealogy lead? The underworld often whispers a mantra, follow the money. So let's put our shoes on and follow it. I am not standing here to scream that a few families control everything on Earth, from the weather to the price of vegetables at the market. No, we work based on evidence. We will document exactly where they have measurable influence and ask ourselves whether that concentration is random or an intricately designed architecture. Domain 1. Global finance and banking, the heart-pumping blood to the world. The modern financial system revolves around central banks. These are the gods of today, the ones who dictate money supply, interest rates, and the life or death of currencies. Who sits in those temples? Bank of England, 1694. History has recorded the deep involvement of the Rothschild family. They pumped money into the British government throughout the 19th century, buying up massive influence. Today, although reputed to be independent, look at who sits in the governor's chair and on the board of directors. It's full of familiar faces stepping out of institutions deeply rooted in the old guard aristocratic banking world. The U.S. Federal Reserve, Fed, 1913. Ah, the crown jewel of power. Did you know it was conceived in a secret meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910? Who were the attendees? Senator Nelson Aldrich, who married his daughter into the Rockefeller family, a representative of J.P. Morgan, and Paul Warburg, the Rothschilds' agent in America. The Fed was designed by the exact representatives of the families whose genealogies we are tracing back to European nobility. Today, the revolving door of power still operates at full capacity. Fed members constantly cycle back and forth between government and private megabanks. European Central Bank, ECB. The current president, Christine Lagarde, has well-documented connections to the French aristocracy. A coincidence? And it doesn't stop there. Look at the heavyweight investment banks. Rothschild and Company still stands tall, coordinating global mergers. J.P. Morgan Chase carries the DNA of British/Welsh aristocratic blood and the Rockefeller Empire. Goldman Sachs, starting from immigrants, took exactly one generation to use strategic marriage to penetrate deep into the elite network, and now holds the privilege of funneling its people straight into government financial apparatuses. Domain 2, energy and resources, the veins of industry. Energy is power, both literally and figuratively. Oil. The Rockefellers' Standard Oil empire, despite being broken up in 1911 into ExxonMobil, Chevron, etc., still sees the family holding shares and pulling strings behind the curtain via trusts. Royal Dutch Shell even bears the title Royal, bestowed directly by the Queen of the Netherlands. Getty Oil, BP, all bear the imprint of British nobility and royal privileges from their inception. Diamonds, De Beers. Cecil Rhodes and later the Oppenheimer family monopolized this sparkling stone. And guess what? They too quickly mixed blood with the British aristocracy. Domain 3. Media, the mind manipulators. Do you think what you read and watch every day is objective truth? Don't be naive. Controlling information is controlling perception. From the historic Hearst newspaper empire to Murdoch's News Corp to Advance Publications, the model is always the same. The families control it, and their descendants aim straight for old elite families to marry. Even Silicon Valley's golden boy, Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, walked this exact path, getting rich from tech, then using massive philanthropy and connections to assimilate into the old power network. Domain 4. Politics and global governance. The puppet theater. Political power is the easiest to see. In the US, we have dynasties like Bush, tracing genealogy back to 17th century English gentry, and Kennedy, connecting to pre-Norman nobility and marrying offspring to European aristocrats. In Europe, the royal families still maintain immensely strong, unofficial influence. And look even higher. Organizations like the United Nations, the World Bank, the IMF, and especially secretive societies and billionaire clubs like the World Economic Forum, WEF, the Bilderberg Group, or the Trilateral Commission. Statistics don't lie. 40% to 60% of those sitting in those closed-door meeting rooms have direct connections to the aristocracy or are married into elite families. Domain 5. Technology. The new era warlords. You will say, Zorro, what about big tech? Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, Jeff Bezos, they aren't nobles. True, the first founding generation were outsiders, but Zorro smiles cynically, tapping his fingers on the table. Look at the second generation. Where are their kids studying? Harvard, Stanford. Who are they marrying? The old money class. Tech money is obediently flowing into the pockets of giant financial institutions like BlackRock and Vanguard, the monsters managing assets for the old families. Tech isn't breaking the old network. It is being swallowed and assimilated by the old network through marriages and shares. If you input all this data into a supercomputer to draw a network graph, you will see a horrifying structure, a perfect core periphery. In the center are the ancient aristocratic families. On the periphery are the nouveau riche trying to marry their kids into the core. Between any two powerful families in the world, there are only about 3 to 4 intermediaries. They share interests. They sit on the same boards of directors. They marry their children to each other. This network is real, measurable by math and data science, not by internet forum rumors. Naked power is concentrating into one group of people. But is that concentration just birds of a feather flocking together naturally? Or is it a molding machine that has run enduringly for 5,000 years since the era of Mesopotamia? The truth lies right on the surface. It's just a matter of whether you dare to look straight at it or not. So, We have laid all the puzzle pieces on the table. The picture of the power network has revealed every knot. Now it's time to pull the trigger. We have 3 ways to explain this colossal mess. The first way, for those who prefer safety, the natural result of elite status. You might say, "Oh, Zorro, that's just normal. Rich and powerful people play golf together, have dinner together, and naturally their kids will fall in love and marry each other." This network formed completely organically. The concentration of power is just the random outcome of a chain of economic and social advantages accumulated from one generation to the next. A grand version of birds of a feather flock together. Sounds agreeable, doesn't it? The second way, carrying the vibe of a mafia movie, conscious coordination. The elite families are not naive enough to let things happen naturally. They are proactive, cold, and ruthless in maintaining this network through strategic marriages arranged like economic contracts. They establish closed-off organizations, executing perfectly synchronized economic and political actions to strangle competitors. They know they hold a network, and they use it as an ultimate weapon to maintain their throne. But in this scenario, that coordination revolves purely around greed, power, and money, without a shred of mysticism about divine bloodlines. And finally, the third way, the bitterest red pill of all, the preserved ancient system. Zorro holds the clay prism up to eye level. The elite families know full well that they are the descendants of ancient bloodlines. They possess an obsessive consciousness regarding the preservation of that genetic legacy, and are continuing to operate the power structures established exactly 5,000 years ago in the dusty plains of Mesopotamia. In this scenario, the system stubbornly persists because the bloodline truly matters, biologically, metaphysically, or both. The evidence on the table allows you to choose any of those 3 interpretations. But there is a silent truth no one can deny. This model exists. It can be measured by soulless numbers, and it has stripped the world of its power to stuff it neatly into the pockets of a few specific families. Let's turn the clock back, returning to the starting line of this journey. We began with a tiny clay prism sitting snugly in a glass case at a museum in Oxford. 400 lines of cuneiform diligently recording kings, ancient cities, glorious dynasties, and sacred bloodlines. We asked a blasphemous question. What if this wasn't a myth? What if the people who carved this clay tablet thousands of years ago were entirely serious about every single stroke? With dirt-stained fingers, we traced the footprints of 12 dynasties spanning a millennium of Mesopotamian documents. We scrutinized their genealogical records, analyzed their insane endogamous marriage patterns, and their arrogant claims of divine origins. We realized a core truth. They structured their entire civilization around a single concept. Bloodline dictates the authority to rule. Whoever carries the blood of the gods shall be king. And then we followed the trail of those bloodlines as they steadily trickled westward, crossing the Hittite Empire, through the destructive fires of Troy, past the marble columns of Rome, weaving into the castles of the medieval European nobility, and finally sitting imposingly on the thrones of modern royal and plutocratic families. Ironically, the test tubes in modern laboratories found DNA genetic evidence of a lurking ancient Near Eastern ancestry, concentrated right in the veins of the European elite, matching terrifyingly perfectly with what the rotting genealogies had proclaimed. So, what has been nailed down as certain? The ancient Mesopotamian dynasties claimed divine origins and recorded genealogies with morbid obsession. The medieval European nobility claimed origins from Eastern sources, like Troy. Modern elite families stash away genealogical documents tracing directly back to medieval nobility. DNA genetic evidence doesn't lie. It confirms Near Eastern admixture in the modern European elite. And above all, Practical power is always concentrated in the families possessing the oldest genealogies, but the darkness still remains. What is still hiding in the fog? Are these genealogical chains truly flawless, unbreakable, or unfakeable throughout thousands of bloody years? The entities called Anunnaki in ancient texts, who or what were they? Gods of thunder? Humans advanced beyond their time? Or some other twisted entity beyond our imagination? Most importantly, does the bloodline genuinely carry some mysterious biological power? Or is it merely a social symbol draped in a sacred cloak to manipulate the masses? And those billionaires in suits drinking champagne over in Davos? Are they fully aware that they are playing the role of priests preserving a 5,000-year-old bloodline? Or do they just think they are excellent businessmen? The clay prism still lies silently in its glass case in Oxford, mutely mocking us. Thousands of cuneiform tablets are still waiting in cold museum basements. Genealogies are still heavily guarded in private archives. Genetic markers are still quietly encoding and replicating in DNA generation after generation. Secret organizations continue to lock their doors for meetings. Families continue to breed, marry, consolidate power, and humanity's greatest question remains wide open. Think about it. If the ancient texts are just myths, then they are the most enduring and stubborn myths in the universe. If the genealogies are just scraps of paper forged for show, then the forgers were so brilliant they anticipated a flawless match with modern DNA testing technology. And if the extreme concentration of power into the hands of these few families is just the result of randomness, then, my friends, the roulette wheel of history has continuously landed on the exact same red square for the past 5,000 years. What are the odds of that? Impossible. From now on, when you turn on the TV and see world leaders smiling and shaking hands at Davos or the UN Security Council, I want you to not just look at their titles or their wealth. Ask yourself, who were their grandparents? When you read an article about a banking dynasty that just swallowed up a global economic sector, ask, where did that family truly come from? Our investigation does not stop here. It will never stop. From the ancient land of Eridu to the financial center of London, from the ruins of Babylon to the glass buildings of Brussels, there is a red thread running through history. Sometimes it appears starkly and ruthlessly. Sometimes it hides deep in the shadows. But it is always there. Always. 12 dynasties. 5,000 years. And a single question will haunt you tonight. What if kingship truly did descend from heaven on some ancient day? And what if the bloodlines that received that kingship have never stopped ruling us? Think about that. Thank you for being brave enough to accompany me on this investigation. Stay curious, keep asking questions, and know that the truth, no matter how brutal its face, will eventually rise to the surface. The stars that once silently watched the ancient Sumerian kings 5,000 years ago, tonight they are still shining brightly in our sky. Look up before you close your eyes to sleep. Ask yourself, search. Goodbye, and see you again in the next dark corners of history.